I'm very, very honored to introduce to you as our keynote speaker tonight, Ambassador Tom Graham.
Thank you, Bob. I'm wondering, this is a fairly small room. Do you think I really need the...
Yes.
You do? You have weak ears, okay. Well, after I start this speech, you may wish I wasn't. Now, I have to say at the beginning, this is a very wonky speech. It's a dusty speech. It's a lot of facts and narrow judgments and so forth as to the meaning of some of these treaties. And I won't take it in the slightest offense if some of you at some points in this speech sort of think about how nice the beach would be or whatever. So I'm warning you in advance. And, but hopefully at least some parts of it will fit in with the mood that has been so eloquently set forth for everyone by the poetry and the music. This is not poetry, this is not musical, but perhaps some parts of it will carry on the feelings and emotions that have already been expressed. 63 years ago tonight, the beautiful city of Hiroshima, Japan, was devastated by the explosion of an atomic bomb. The bomb released the explosive equivalent of 2,500 tons of TNT and killed outright or over time by radiation poisoning nearly 75% of the population of that city. 3 days later, similar devastation was brought to the city of Nagasaki, and a few days after that, the Second World War, the bloodiest and most destructive in the history of humanity, came to an end. Many thought then, and in subsequent years, that the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the harbingers of the future, and that nuclear weapons were destined to spread around the world and be part of future wars, threatening the survival of humanity. These views were reinforced by the commencement, in a few years, of a vast nuclear arms race, with both the United States and the Soviet Union rapidly developing the capability to destroy the Earth many times over. President John F. Kennedy was one of those who feared that nuclear weapons would inherit the Earth. There were predictions during his administration that by the end of the 1970s, there could be 15 to 20 nuclear weapon states in the world, with nuclear weapons fully integrated into their national arsenals. If this had happened, likely there would be twice or more many today. In 2004, for example, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammed El-Baradei, asserted that there were more than 40 states in the world that currently could build nuclear weapons if they so chose. Such a development would have had the world community in a situation where every conflict would run the risk of going nuclear, and there would be no way to keep nuclear weapons out of the hands of terrorist organizations. They would be so widespread. Such an international security situation would have been created as to make today's time of troubles seem like paradise by comparison. But such nuclear weapon proliferation did not happen. President Kennedy's darkest fears were not realized. And I would submit that the principal reason that this did not happen was the entry into force of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, in 1970. It converted what had been an act of national pride into an act of international outlawry. In 1960, after the first French nuclear test in the Sahara, the French newspapers were overflowing with nationalistic sentiment. Vive la France and vive de Gaulle. Switzerland held 2 national referenda, and the Swiss public twice voted to build nuclear weapons, the Swiss. Sweden had an active nuclear weapons program. However, after the NPT was in force, when the Indians conducted their first nuclear weapon test in 1974, just a few years later, they were condemned by the entire world, and they had to hasten to declare that their nuclear explosion was peaceful. The NPT essentially drew the line where the world was in 1970. It recognized 5 existing nuclear weapon states: the United States, Britain, France, the Soviet Union, Russia, and China, and provided that the rest of the world would agree not to acquire nuclear weapons. But as Bob said, the NPT did not come as a free gift to the 5 nuclear weapon states from the rest of the world. Rather, it is a strategic arrangement founded on a central bargain. That bargain was, and is, non-proliferation in exchange for the sharing of peaceful technology and nuclear disarmament. Nuclear disarmament was perceived by the non-nuclear states as the 5 nuclear weapon states, over the long term, agreeing to negotiate away their nuclear arsenals, so that ultimately all states would receive equal treatment under the NPT. Since it was recognized that this would take a very long time, the non-nuclear weapon states pressed the nuclear weapon states to agree to interim measures to include a comprehensive nuclear weapon test ban, a prohibition on the further production of nuclear explosive material, a significant worldwide reduction in the number of nuclear weapons, and binding obligations not to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear NPT parties, among other things. None of these measures has been realized 40 years later. But there was one of these measures, which was seen in 1970 as a sort of litmus test, which would indicate whether or not the 5 nuclear weapon states would, over time, live up to their side of the central bargain. That is, a comprehensive nuclear test ban. It was included in the preamble of the NPT. NPT review conferences several times over the years failed because of disagreement over this issue. When the NPT was made a permanent treaty in 1995, there was a recommitment to conclude a test ban in 1 year, that is, by 1996. The non-nuclear weapon states' view was, and again is, that if we're going to give up nuclear weapons, at least the 5 nuclear weapon states could agree to stop testing their weapons